How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile on Sergio Aguero, Barcelona's newest elite striker, who's now coming from Man City, the runners-up from Champions League. And I guess the thing about knowing the player that Sergio Aguero is before he teams up with Messi, his Argentina national teammate, by the way. I think it's worth knowing because he has a very storied history, especially with Manchester City. He is their all-time leading goal scorer, and he is Argentina's third highest goal scorer in his country's history, behind Diego Maradona and Lionel Messi. So, just for those alone, I think it's totally worth getting into the player that he is. And with this profile, I'm going to go through his achievements, his accolades, just to give a better picture of who he is and to give it a good understanding as to why many people around the world perceive him as one of the best strikers in the world, even though I don't think he started in the Champions League final. But regardless, Sergio Aguero is about a 5'8" striker. He's he's a very athletic. He's a very thick, very wide, very fast, very quick striker. He can shoot with both feet. He's very smart. He's very intuitive. He knows which way the goalie's gonna go. He knows where to just chip the ball. He's very cheeky. He's a very interesting soccer player. And of course, the way he plays, he creates space for others. And within various systems at Manchester City, he's just been able to make it work. And he's consistently been able to find ways for himself at a rate that has led him to become Manchester City's all-time leading goal scorer. So if you don't know anything about him, like I just said earlier, he's originally from Argentina. He's from Buenos Aires. He would get his start for an Argentinian soccer club called Independiente when he was 15 years old. And I really could go through each Independiente season. Long story short, he didn't win much with Independiente, but by being on a team of that stature at that young of an age, he was a young prospect on the radar of virtually the world. And by the time he was 18, he was ready to make the move to. So by the time he was 18 in 2006, he was ready to make the move from Independiente all the way to Spain to go play for Atletico Madrid. And after the 2006 World Cup, in which Argentina would end up losing in the quarterfinals to Germany, following that, Sergio Aguero would actually get called up to the Argentinian national team in September. But by then, he was already playing matchups for Atletico Madrid, and his very first season was his age 18 season in 2006-2007. In this season, he would end up starting 25 of the 38 matchups he would play, in a season where Atletico Madrid would finish with the 7th best record in the season. And they would end up losing in the round of 16 in the Copa del Rey. That was when Fernando Torres was the leading scorer. And of course, with that, they would not clinch Europa League or Champions League for the next season. But still, within that year, within La Liga, Sergio Aguero would finish with 6 goals and 2 assists in the 38 matches he played as a young teenager, which of course is actually a lot when you consider what it takes to score at that level at Atletico Madrid. But nonetheless, he was just getting started. He was just getting his feet wet. He would come back for his second season, his age 19 season in Atletico Madrid. In 2007-2008, he would start 35 of the 37 matches he would play. He would become a full-time starter on Atletico Madrid as virtually as a 19-year-old. And as a teenager, he would finish with 20 goals and 6 assists in a season where Atletico Madrid finished with the 4th best record in the league. They would lose in the round of 32 in the UEFA Cup, but Sergio Aguero would become the team's leading scorer for the very first time in his career. And the fact that he dropped 20 goals in a La Liga season as a teenager, I'm pretty sure Lionel Messi is maybe the only other teenager to have even done that. So the fact that he even season did that, even though Atletico Madrid didn't really go far with this one. But in 2008, they were performing at that level, and even within the UEFA Cup, in the 7 matches he played, he finished with 5 goals there as well. Following that season, he would come back for his age 20 season in Atletico Madrid for 2008-2009. In his age 20 season, he would start 34 of the 37 matches he played in a season where Atletico Madrid finished with the 4th best record in La Liga. For the second year in a row, Diego Forlan would end up being the team's leading scorer. They would make the quarterfinals for the Copa del Rey before they lost, and they would lose in the round of 16 in UEFA Champions League after clinching UEFA Champions League after not being in it for a while. Within La Liga itself, Aguero would finish with 17 goals, 3 less than the year before, but he finished with 9 assists. 3 more assists than the year before as well, and that's what he was doing domestically. Once they made Champions League, in the 8 matches he played, he finished with 3 goals and an assist. And this is all while he was a 20-year-old kid, younger than I was, and he was still getting better, still honing his craft. His 4th season in Atletico Madrid was his age 21 season in 2009-2010. In that year, he would start 24 of the 31 matchups that he would play in a season where Atletico Madrid finished with the 9th best record in La Liga. They would finish runners-up in Copa del Rey and actually win the Europa League regardless, though. Within this season, in 2009-2010, within the La Liga games, Sergio Aguero would finish with 12 goals and 4 assists. So yet another season with double-digit goals. But since this season was impacted by injury, of course, he had less production than other years. And then once he made it to Europa League, he would finish with 3 goals and an assist in the 4 matches that he would end up playing, or in the 8 matches he ended up playing, he would end up with 2 goals and 3 assists to help Atletico Madrid win the Europa League. So, of course, that was a big accomplishment there. And in 2010, he would get called up to the World Cup for Argentina. And that year, he would not score for them, but the Argentina would end up making it to the quarterfinals where they lost to Germany. This would be the second World Cup in a row in which Argentina ended up losing to Germany. They lost 4-0, and this was the World Cup that took place in South Africa. So right now but then following that World Cup, Sergio Aguero would help Atletico Madrid win the UEFA Super Cup after winning Europa League. But going into that season, Sergio Aguero he would play going into his 5th and final season in La Liga for Atletico Madrid, his age 22 season. He would start 31 of the 32 games in a season where Atletico Madrid finished with the 7th best record in La Liga. He would finish with 20 goals for the second time, or 20 goals in a La Liga season for the second time in his 5-year span there, alongside 3 assists. Not to mention what he was doing in the Europa League that season when they got knocked out at group stage. They only played 4 games, and in those 4 games he would finish with 3 goals and an assist. But of course, the team wasn't enough. Following that season in 2011, he would go on to make the move to Man City, and then he would go on to sign a 5-year club, but he would go on to sign with the club that he currently calls home. He's been there since 2011, which has been an exact decade, and this is exactly how it went. So his first season in Manchester City was his 6th senior circuit season, and was his age 23 season in 2011-2012. In that season, he would start 31 of the 34 games that he would play in a season where Manchester City would finish with the best record in the Premier League. That was the first time that they had actually won the Premier League since 1968. So, of course, that was a big season. Sergio Aguero would lead the team in scoring, and that was the only trophy that they won that year. They finished as the closest they came to another one. They finished runner-up in the Community Shield. But looking at how Sergio Aguero fared in the Premier League itself, he would finish with 23 goals and 9 assists. This is the second season in a row in which he would score 20 goals in a senior league. and this is the third time that he's ever done it as a pro. The first time he's done it in England. He had 9 assists as well, which ties the most assists he's ever put up in a La Liga season as well. So, of course, you can see Sergio Aguero leveling up as a player. And then once he made it to Manchester City, they would get knocked out in group stage. But in the 6 games that they played, he finished with a goal. But right now, that's where he was sitting after his very first season with Man City, already with a Premier League title in the trophy case. In his age 24 season, his second season in Man City in 2012-2013, he would start 22 of the 30 games that he played in an injury-plagued one, in a season where Manchester City would finish with the second best record in the Premier League. They would also finish runners-up in the FA Cup final, but they would end up winning the Community Shield this year. They still came home with a trophy. In the Premier League season itself, in those 30 seasons, Sergio Aguero would finish with 12 goals and 2 assists, which is tied for the least amount of assists he's ever put up in a Premier League season. And except for this most recent season, it is the least amount of goals that Sergio Aguero has put up. Was the least amount that he's put up in his first 9 seasons in Manchester City, just to give a hint as to how well he was playing at that time. Once Manchester City would get knocked out of group stage this year, they would come back in 2013-14, ready for another one. In Sergio Aguero's third season in the Premier League, he would start 20 of the 23 matchups he would play for a Manchester City side that ended up winning the Premier League title for the second time in 3 years. Might I remind you, the last time they won before 2012 was 1968, but also this is a year in which Manchester City would win the Football League Cup final, and then they would lose in the round of 16 in Champions League. Sergio Aguero would lead the team in scoring for the third year in a row. In the Premier League, he would finish with 17 goals and 6 assists, mind you, in 23 games played. So of course he was playing incredibly well, and being able to do that in the Premier League itself is incredible. And then in the Champions League that year, when in the 6th round, when they made it to the round of 16, they played 6 games, and he would finish with 6 goals and 2 assists, which is tied. He scored 6 goals in the Champions League 2 other times, but the fact that he was able to do it like this, even though they didn't win, like, he was still very important to them getting to where they were. But following that season, he would come back to Man City for yet another season after winning 2 Premier League titles in his first 3 seasons with Man City. Sergio Aguero would compete with Argentina at the 2014 World Cup, and this was another World Cup in which Sergio Aguero played. He didn't necessarily score, but of course he was very vital into Argentina making it as far as they did. They would go on to make it out. They would go on to sweep their group stage. They would go on to beat Switzerland 1-0 in the round of 16. They beat Belgium 1-0 in quarterfinals. They beat the Netherlands in the semifinals on PKs, and then they would end up losing to Germany in the final, and this is when the World Cup was in Rio. This is the 3rd World Cup in a row in which Argentina lost to Germany, but this is the 2nd time in a row in which Sergio Aguero specifically lost to Germany. But following that 2014 season, Sergio Aguero would come back to Man City for his 4th season. In his age 26 season, he would play 30. He would start 30 of the 33 games he played in a season in which Man City would finish with the second best record in the Premier League. They would not win a title this year, as they finished up runners-up in the Community Shield as well. In the Premier League itself, Sergio Aguero would finish with 26 goals and 8 assists. That is the most goals he's ever put up in a domestic season, like, ever to this date. And he also put up 8 assists. The combined goals and assists, 34 goals a part of, or goals created. That's the most he's ever put up in a season as well. This was his highest production season, even though Man City wasn't able to bring home a trophy from it. But coming off of the World Cup, Sergio Aguero was actually in some pretty amazing form. And when they were in Champions League and they lost in the round of 16, he played 7 matches. He would finish with 6 goals for the second year in a row in Champions League, alongside an assist. But they would go on to get eliminated right then and there. And then he would come back for his 5th season in Manchester City in 2015-2016 in his age 27 season, which was his 10th senior season since coming to Atletico Madrid as an 18-year-old. But in 2015-2016, he would start 29 of the 30 matches he would play, in a season in which Man City finished with the 4th best record in the Premier League. The only trophy they would take home was the League Cup final, which of course they gladly took home. This was the 5th year in a row in which Sergio Aguero would lead the team in scoring. In the Premier League specifically in this year, he would finish with 24 goals and 2 assists. That is the second most amount of goals that Sergio Aguero has ever put up in a domestic season. Not to mention that he was in the 9 games they would play in Champions League, he would put up 2 goals. But Manchester City would make it the farthest that they've ever made it since he'd been there. They made it to the semifinals, but it wasn't quite the finals. Following that, he would come back for his age 28 season at he would come back for his age 28 season at Man City in 2016-2017. He would start 25 of the 31 games he would play, in a season in which Manchester City finished with the 3rd best record in the Premier League. They would not take a trophy home this year. They would get knocked out the round of 16. Yet, Sergio Aguero would lead the team in scoring for his 6th year. So every year he's been, so far the first 6 years he's been at Man City, or 5 of the 6 years he's been at Man City, he's virtually led the team in scoring. Well, I guess he led them the year which he was shorthanded as well. But so that's 6 years in a row. He would score 20 goals in the Premier League for the 3rd time in a row, for the 4th time in his first 6 years there. And this would be the 6th time he scored 20 goals in a senior club, or at a top club in a top league, including his years at Atletico. So just to show his consistency, what he's been able to do through there. And then once they made the Champions League in the 7 games that he played up through the round of 16, Sergio Aguero would go on to score 5 goals and 3 assists. This would be the 4th time in his career, or I guess the 3rd time in his career, in which he scored 5 goals in the Champions League. This is the first time in which he finished with 3 assists. That's the only time he finished with 3 assists in a Champions League season. Nonetheless, after this season, he would come back for his 7th season at Manchester City, his age 29 season in 2017 through 2008. In this season, he would start 22 of the 25 matchups he would play in a season in which Manchester City finished with the best record in the Premier League. This is their 3rd Premier League title since 2012 in a 7-year span. They would go on to win the EFL Cup final for the 3rd time in a 5-year span. Mind you, the last time they won it since 2014 was 1976, and they'd won it 3 times in a 5-year span, with Sergio Aguero leading the team and scoring the entire time. And then once they made Champions League and when they made it to the quarterfinals, Aguero would finish with 4 goals and an assist. But still, once again, he would bring Manchester City to the top of England, winning the trophies that he did. And then following this 2017-2018 season, he would compete for Argentina yet again, this time at the 2018 World Cup. This one took place in Russia. In the group stage, he would actually score in the very first group stage match. This is the only World Cup goal that he scored in the 3 World Cup tournaments he played. He did it against Iceland, and this was a draw. But they needed that point to, of course, make it out of that round. But then they would end up losing in the round of 16 to France 4-3 as Aguero scored the third goal for Argentina. As of right now he has two goals in his three World Cup appearances, all from his last World Cup appearance, just to give a little bit of context into how he played. But following the 2018 World Cup, Sergio Aguero would go on to play 31 of the 33 games that he would play in a season where Manchester City would go on to win the Premier League title for the second year in a row, and for the fourth time in the 8 years that Sergio Aguero has been there. In that season, in that Premier League season, Sergio Aguero would go on to finish with 21 goals and 8 assists. This would go on to be the fifth season in a row in which he finished with 20 goals in the Premier League. That's the last time in which he finished with 20 goals in the Premier League in his age 30 season. This is the sixth time. Well, that's the seventh time he finished with 20 goals in the Premier League. That is the ninth time in which he finished with 20 goals in a top league, and the fact that he was able to do that with such consistency should speak to what he was able to just speak to his abilities. In addition to that, they would go on to win the FA Cup final for the first time since Aguero had been there. The last time Man City had won it was before Aguero got there, so that was the one trophy in England that he was missing. They would go on to win the EFL Cup final, which of course gave him a treble. And then they would go on to win the Community Shield. So they basically won all of the trophies that England had to offer. So they won the English quadruple. So that was a big season for Man City, and this was of course under Pep Guardiola, and not to mention in Champions League. They would lose in the quarterfinal in 7 games, but Sergio Aguero would finish with 6 goals and an assist. This is the last season in which he finished with 6 goals in the Champions League, and following that season, Sergio Aguero would come back to Man City for his 9th season. In 2019-2020, his age 31 season, he would start 18 of the 24 matches he would play in a season in which Manchester City finished with the second best record in the Premier League. They would take home the Community Shield for the third time since he had been there, for the second year in a row. And then he would go on to win the EFL Cup final for the third year in a row, for the fourth time in 5 years, and for the fifth time in 7 years since he had been with the club. So, of course, that was a big trophy to pick up as well. In that Premier League season, in those 24 games, he'd finished with 16 goals and 3 assists. That's the first season since 2013-14, since his age 25 season, in which he didn't finish with 20 goals. But, of course, he played 9 less games than he did the season before. But he still finished with double-digit goals, continuing his streak up until ever since 2008, when he was 19 years old, or in La Liga. The last season before that in which he scored single digits was his first year in Spain, which is when he was 18 years old. Nonetheless, that's how he finished. He finished with 16 goals in 2019-2020, a season that was heavily impacted by COVID-19, in which fans weren't supposed to be there, and a big chunk of their season was cut in the middle. But regardless, they would also make quarterfinals for Champions League, and then they would end up losing there. But in the 30 games that they played, Aguero finished with 2 goals. And then following the 2020 season, they would have to delay the start for the 2020-2021 season, but they most recently finished it. And in his very final season with Manchester City, in his 10th season there, his 15th senior season as a pro, at least playing in Europe, in one of the top 5 leagues in all of Europe. Sergio Aguero would go on to start 7 of the 12 matchups in a season in which Manchester City would finish with the best record in the Premier League. This is the 5th Premier League title that Manchester City has won in Sergio Aguero's 10 years there. That is an incredible feat considering how competitive the Premier League is. They won 5 in a decade. That's virtually that is dynastic if you want to really go into definitions there. In addition to winning the Premier League, they would go on to win the EFL Cup final for the fourth year in a row, for the sixth time in the last 8 years, to give a little bit more context, just to show how much they were dominating. And they finished the runners up in the Champions League to their Premier League opponents, their Premier League contemporaries, Chelsea. But regardless, 5 Premier League titles in 10 seasons is crazy. And then in the Premier League season he played, in the 12 games he played, he finished with 4 goals and an assist. That's the least amount of goals he's had in a senior season since his very first Atletico Madrid season. But of course, he only played 12 games. And then in addition to this, he also finished with 2 goals in the 7 Champions League matches that he played for Manchester City, and he only started one of those games this season. So that should give you a sense of where he was at in Manchester City towards the end of his tenure. But following that, not very long ago, actually, I want to say on May 31st, which was about 3 days ago, Sergio Aguero signed with Barcelona right before his 33rd birthday, and that's about where we are right now. Sergio Aguero is coming off of 15 amazing years of showing that he was one of the best players. He was arguably the best striker, or one of the best strikers in Spain, and he was showing that he was one of the best strikers, if not the best striker in the Premier League for the last 10 years. I'm not sure as to whether anyone has really rivaled him in his decade at Man City. Since he's been there in the Premier League alone, he has 184 goals and 49 assists in those 275 matches played, which is crazy. That's 0.71 goals per 90 minutes. And then looking at how he fared in all competitions ever since he's been at Man City, I mean, this guy is basically a legend. He has 247 career goals and 62 career assists and 41 career penalty kick goals in 375 matches with Manchester City. And now with all that, he is going to join his Argentina teammate Lionel Messi on Barcelona. Hopefully, if Lionel Messi stays with them, that could be a very interesting matchup, or a very interesting dynamic between the two. I know the two have a lot of respect between each other, because they are two players that have netted hundreds of goals in Europe's top leagues, which is something that a very small handful of people can say. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 28 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. Once again, today is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. I want to wish Sergio Aguero a happy 33rd birthday. And with that said, once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I will come back tomorrow with another episode of The Elite. I hope all is well. I want to thank everyone for listening to my piece yet again, and peace out. I'll catch you tomorrow.